Hello, so welcome back. It's felt like an age, hasn't it, since Emmanuel Dennis received that second yellow and condemned the game week to an absolute farce for many. I mean, it was a cultural event in FPL, I think. I think we'll remember it for years to come. But there's been a bit of a break, hasn't there? And we returned to you with just one game to go in game week 23, double game week 23. It's still going. It's still here. It's a bit of a cliffhanger ending, but it's a bit of a crap one, to be honest. You know the outcome's going to be rubbish, but you're still watching, that kind of sort of series thing. I'll riff on that later. So it's been a bit of a long break, and we thought we'd just shake off some of the rust and get ourselves going again after that break. We are Who Got the Assist. I'm Tom at WGTA_FPL on Twitter. My co-host is at FPL Stag, Mr. Anthony there. And we're joined today by FPL Fairy, aka Steve. Now, he's a decent manager, 7 top 15k and 4 top 4k things he's told me to read out here. But to be honest, what's more important to me is that he's a great bloke. I've met him for a couple of beers in the not too distant past, back in Brisbane, when I was down under a couple of years ago. And to the delight of our Irish listeners, Steve's Irish, which completes the sandwich today. So welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be on the pod. I've been a long-time listener and enjoying the show from afar, I suppose, back when it was yourself and Nick, and then more recently when my fellow Irishman has joined you. And I suppose it was actually interesting listening in that, say, FPL Harry will be coming on board from March, and looking forward to listening to Lucy next year as well. Would you believe that randomly I was looking through my phone when we were texting earlier, and it's 2 years to today since we had those beers in Australia. So
no way.
That's a little fun fact for you.
Wow, that's crazy. That actually does tally as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's second. It's crazy.
Wow, amazing.
But yeah, it's great to have you on, Steve. What a long 2 years that's been. That doesn't feel like 2 years at all. It feels more like 5, because I remember Tom being away and doing the podcast while he was away. That feels like a very long time ago at this stage. And I guess given the fact that we do have a game week still ongoing, and given that FPL seems like something that we haven't been able to engage with for quite some time, this is going to be a fairly relaxed chat about, FPL coming back after this bit of a break, after the disaster of the double game week. So we're not going to have much of our usual preamble with market forces and the like. And we will review our game weeks to a point, but of course, there's only a certain extent to which that there's worth going through that. And then we have a bunch of listeners' questions to go through market forces and kind of just a bit of a look back on where we are so far with this season. And I should probably note as well, apologies about my microphone quality this week. Things meant that I'm not with my good microphone, so we'll just have to go with what I have.
Cool. Right, let's kick off with the game week reviews, if we even want to look at that nightmare double game week. And Steve, as the guest, it's only right that we start with yourself. Talk us through, if you want to, this game week, and also talk us through how you've been getting on this season, because I'm sure the picture is a lot more rosy than this 1 week.
I'd like to skip this section, please, and move quickly on to next game week. But unfortunately, in this game week, which kind of seems to be lasting forever, I'm currently sitting on a total of 17 points. I don't even see how I can hit 20 unless it looks like Foster's going to play as well. So that's probably going to affect me. But look, it's been a bad game week. I'm one of those who brought in Dennis, made him captain. I've got Ronaldo and Calvert-Lewin up top as well. So I have a total of 1 point from my 3 forwards so far this game week. My defense is very poor as well. I have Cancelo, Trent and Alonso for a total of 5 points. I have Foster in goals with 0, but De Gea is on my bench, so that probably won't work out for me. And then my midfield, I have the 2 Man City assets of Foden and Bernardo with 2 points each. Foden with 2 points and Jota with a huge 5 points for me. So extremely poor game week, and it looks like I'm on for a massive red arrow. But I suppose it's just FPL where we've got to kind of keep rolling with the punches. And I suppose then just in general, I suppose on my season so far, I think I've had one of my best starts ever. I was just kind of looking at, say, my game week history, and I can see like from game week 11 to game week 19, I was like inside the top 5k for most of that time. So had a really, really positive start. And I usually start badly and finish strong, but I think I've done the opposite here, where I've gone from like 4k to about 30k going into this game week, and I think by the end of this, it's going to be like up in the 40s. So yeah, it's been a strange season. I think like I've kind of playing a bit of a different style to how I normally play, where I've been kind of taking a couple of risks and that, and they all seem to be not working out for me at the moment. But I've got all chips intact, so kind of hopefully now we'll be able to push on over the rest of the season.
Fair play. I mean, being well, 40k-ish is still pretty, still okay. I mean, I think we're still fairly bunched up, and I'm sure that a couple of good weeks, decent chip deployment, you'll get where you want to be.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. On to me. It's 27 -4 for me. I moved in Josh King for Ronaldo. I took a 1-week punt on Sterling for Saka. Feels a long time ago now, I'm sure, to many of you. But Raheem Sterling missed a serious sitter. And I think that summed up my game week, really. I've only had 2 returns here. So, Steve, I beat you by 1. I had that dodgy assist for Jota. And I also got a Ramsdale clean sheet and 2 bonus from 1 save, was it? Something like that. But yeah, 27 -4, so 23 nets with just Josh King left. God, it's terrible, isn't it? So I've managed to fall in 4 game weeks from 100k to 250k. So I'm on my wild card now, basically, just to try to sort things out, take advantage of things. So I'm too far off the running now to use the kind of the straightforward sort of orthodox wild card swing. So I think later on, probably towards the end of the podcast, when we do transfers and captains, I'll kind of introduce that to you guys, see what you think, and you can rubbish it, and I'm not going to listen to you, and I'll do my own thing and have a disaster anyway. Anyway, right. And finally, Anthony, with the strongest score of this week, which is probably quite an interesting thing to say.
Yeah, it is interesting to say. I'm within 21 points of you now, Tom, and I think it was something like 80 or 90 about 3 game weeks ago.
Depressing, isn't it?
Such is the way things have gone. 1 good week for me, and then avoiding complete disaster for 2 other game weeks, and things have kind of switched a little bit. Where am I at? So I have 32 points this week. I made 1 transfer. I moved out Neil Mopé, one of the 5 strikers who managed to actually get a return this game. He got an assist, and I brought in João Pedro because I already had Dennis, who I didn't captain, thankfully. And I just felt like on eye test alone, to be honest, that João Pedro would be better than Josh King, even though all of the algorithms suggested that Josh King was the other Watford striker to pick up. Yeah, I can't say I'm happy with that decision at this point, but at the same time, we kind of have to live with it. With 1 game left to go, at least I will have presumably 1 Watford forward in the last game of the double game week. I started with Foster in goals, unfortunately, and a bit like Steve, with Foster likely to play, it's De Gea being blocked coming off the bench. So the 6 points kind of gone a begging there, and indeed another 6 points went a begging in my bench 1 slot because Ezri Konsa got a clean sheet and I didn't start him. That's kind of because of Ronaldo. I had Ronaldo in my squad. I didn't want to sell Ronaldo because there was a good United fixture. But at the same time, because Ronaldo was likely to be injured, I captained Bruno, which of course is an awful lot better than captaining Dennis. 6 points is a hell of a lot better than -2 points. But at the same time, I kind of feel like the Ronaldo injury that wasn't led to me captaining Bruno, which wasn't a great captaincy, led to me keeping Ronaldo on the pitch, which stopped Konsa playing. It was just, there was a culmination of factors that didn't go together there. But overall, I can't really complain because my 32 points were largely powered by, of all people, Emmerich Laporte with his 10-pointer, my only double-figure haul in the game week. The only other return that I got was Diogo Jota's assist. So it's 2s and stuff otherwise. Not a bad week. Green arrows, 32 points. We move, we get closer to Tom. I do expect to be punished by Josh King in the last game of this game week, because I just feel like that would be the only way that this could be kind of turned upside down and made a disaster. But up to now, I actually hilariously can't complain. Although I must say, when I opened up my FPL team, having not looked at it for about 10 days, I was just thinking, why have I got so many Man United players? Like, what have I been doing? That was my immediate thought, and I feel like that's going to be something I'll need to rectify. I guess we'll talk about that later.
Oh, objective o'clock. So quite an interesting one this week for me. But starting with you, Anthony, I mean, I think actually a few of your objectives are completely null and void now. It's only really captaincy and transfers that apply, isn't it?
Yeah, I've basically thrown my objectives out the window at this point because I was playing far too conservatively and it wasn't working for me. And even still, I'm kind of I've broken away from the captaincy algorithms in the last 2 game weeks, largely because I felt like the algorithms were being skewed enormously by double game week data, and I just wasn't too keen on it. And so that was why I went ahead and captained Bruno Fernandes this week, kind of on a bit of a solo run more than anything. So that's definitely a breach of that objective. But there wasn't really a question of transferring out any of my elite players if I felt they'd dropped off before now. I guess you could argue Ronaldo was that, but there was no clear alternative for who I would bring him in for. And I guess with United's fixtures turning, I wanted to give him, Ralph, whoever, every chance they could have to come good. But Ronaldo may still find himself on the chopping board. If it's not him, it'll be Bruno who might move on. So I will be following through on that objective soon, but not this week.
Okay, fair enough. All right, I've got a confession to make. It took me 23 game weeks, but I finally broken one of these, captaincy. So Mikel did go with King. I went with Dennis for captain this game week. In my defense, I was out watching the game. I felt like I wanted to be part of a cultural event. It's just mad, isn't it? I follow the algo, right? I follow the algo for Kai Havertz over Salah. I follow the algo, Antonio over Bowen. And I feel okay with the algo recommending me to I just have Ronaldo, so I don't buy Bruno. And in this instance, the time I do break it, it's a -2 for my captain versus, well, at least King hasn't punished me quite yet. And he's still under 100% EO at my OR, but doesn't really mean anything, does it? At least there was no FOMO, you know. At least I can say in the future, I was there. I was part of it, just like that Duffy captaincy. Just like that Duffy captaincy, Anthony.
Well, that was one of the happiest times. I must say, I wasn't watching the Watford game live. And I came out of a restaurant. I was having dinner with my girlfriend, and I walked out onto the street and checked the score quickly on my phone. And I saw that Dennis had been sent off, and I started like gutturally laughing in the middle of the street. I was to a few looks, but it was very funny.
I was out having some time outside with Jack FPL and a couple of other people, and one of our friends. So I was watching it in a big group with Nima, and there's a London meetup scene we'll talk about in a little bit. And my friend Sim came out and was just like, Dennis has been sent off, mate. I was like, you're joking. And Jack was like, you're fucking joking. It's like, no, he's actually gone. And we both had to check our phones. And we both did the same, just burst out laughing. So it just felt like one of those where you just look at it and go, well, what can you do? It's just so stupid. Anyway, elsewhere, I did bring Sterling in, so it was the 50-50 situation. I thought the form was with him, the form was with City. So, yeah, I thought I'd go with it. And, hey, he was just one finish with conviction away from paying off. Anyway, any kind of objectives for this season or kind of a sense of raison d'etre for you, Steve, when it comes to this sort of thing?
I don't think I have like specific objectives that I stick to, but I think like in summary to your points there, I think like for the captaincy, it's been pretty straightforward for me this season until recently. Just been captain in Salah, and it's kind of actually coincided with my bad run. So as say Salah has gone, I've been captaining players that have just kind of been off form. So that's not working out too well for me. I'm enjoying though, kind of, it's the first season I've kind of been looking at the predicted points, and I'm kind of using the hubs tool there to like if I've got a kind of like 50-50 between captaincy, I've been using that as well a little bit. I suppose on the transfers, something that I've tried to change to this season is having like a squad of say 14, 15 instead of just having 12 players. I think like learning from Josh, who won 2 years ago, I know that he was a big advocate of like taking the worst player out of your squad each week. So like instead of selling say Calvert-Lewin for Watkins, like say for me this week now, it's pretty clear that I have a big problem in defense. So like removing those players is something that I've been trying to stick to. And then I suppose as a play style as a whole, I'm pretty calm and slow with my chips. I get a bit of slagging in another Irish group where I kind of came from behind and won the league on the last day of the season last year, and the guys they say that I think I have my communion money in the bank because I can kind of I can hold on to things for a very long time, like I do with my chips. So yeah, that's me with my objectives for this season.
Very good. And actually, you know what, Steve? You noted that you felt like you hadn't been playing like you usually would lately. just there when you were kind of talking about your season so far, would you say that that's largely because you just started to take risks that you wouldn't usually take? And why, I guess, did you feel you were doing that because you were trying to make up for the Salah when you had lost the Salah and you weren't able to captain him anymore, that suddenly the uncertainty and a few bad results were making you jump to do things you wouldn't naturally do? Is that what happened?
Yeah, I think I have a bit of regret. I think it's like 3 or 4 game weeks ago, and I was very close to using the free hit. It's the week that the free hit went really well for people, and I was on the fence like for the whole week, and then I didn't go for it. I think I only made one transfer that week, and I took like my first kind of big, say, red arrow in a while, from say like 5k out to say 20k, and then the following week, I know, like looking back at that, I ended up say taking like a -8 with 2 minutes to go to the deadline. I brought in like Johnson from West Ham, who didn't even play, and there's just a kind of a few things there in a row. And then I had players that weren't playing when all the games were getting kind of called off, and I feel like you can get into a bit of a rut. But I think this break has been good, that it's kind of given me a bit of time to like step away from like FPL and just listen to some normal kind of football podcasts and all that. I suppose we're coming back now, refreshed and recharged for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I just haven't thought about it for about a week or two. I'm on my wildcard, right? And normally you kind of be sat there doing different manifestations. And I was like, on our Slack, like posting like, oh, I could do this, could do that. And then maybe Aiden did better by being away and, having a lot of work to do. I just stopped thinking about it for a while. And it's been quite good. It's been quite nice to just kind of take that step back. And hopefully this first time people are kind of thinking about it is for listening
on your Wordle instead.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Two try hero the other day. I was very pleased with myself. Anyway,
that was me today.
Oh yeah. Anyway, let's. I think so. As mentioned earlier, we're going to skip the mini league update. We're going to skip the market forces for now and take a break there before we disintegrate into Wordle chat, and we'll move on to the main topic just after this. Cool. So we're back, and I suppose we're on to the main topic this week, which is, well, where were we in FPL? I think this kind of makes sense as a topic, just because this winter break, as I alluded to in the intro, has the feel of a season or a series TV show between them, like a between seasons. There's a cliffhanger, a bit of a crap one, as I said earlier, left in the air between seasons in the shape of that kind of Watford Burnley game that they're hoping to finally play on Saturday, third time lucky. So I guess the role of this pod, given the time's been recorded, that's the evening of Wednesday, the 2nd of February, is to kind of just catch everybody up on how FPL is looking at the end of what is a bit of a lull in proceedings.
Remember when the final season of Game of Thrones was coming out, and we all knew there was only a 1.5-hour episode left at the very end of it, and you were like, they can't possibly rescue the whole entire thing with this hour and a half, but we'll try anyway. And that's exactly what the 90 minutes of Watford Burnley is, isn't
it? It's exactly that, basically. I think the first thing to do here is to look at some key themes, give you the story of the season so far, give you a snapshot, I guess, of how the FPL has been progressing. And it'll perhaps call back to a couple of our data dives, so the 200 Club podcast, for example. Basically what I did, I looked through, because I'm really sad, basically, how this season in terms of points per position and overall points compares to previous seasons at this point, to see if there's anything of real interest. Has this season changed in any way differently to others? I was expecting, of course, see wild swings and things like this in the data, things like forwards, being pummeled and defenders riding a wave. There are a few things in the data if you compare the last 5 years. So we're about 110 points down on last season by this point, which was similarly scarred by COVID. So there is some commonality between them. The non-COVID seasons, though, massively down. So we're a whopping about 400 points on average down on an average season at this point. And we've seen forward points dip as a proportion of overall points. So 140 or so points, less points have been scored by forwards this year as opposed to kind of prior years. And defenders are broadly mopping up the change of it. So the defenders this year have scored 50 points more than last year's tally. Interesting to note, the midfielder points have risen slightly on last year, but they've remained in line with expectation. So regardless of COVID or not, the midfielders around this time will be scoring about 7,700 points, and we're pretty much dead on that this year. You might think, wow, that's massive. That's going to be huge changes in terms of proportions of points scored. Not really, because the base number of players involved doesn't really change year on year. There's only tiny proportional shifts if you look at the game on the macro level. So defender points and midfielder points have risen 0.5 and 0.6%, so very slight gains, and forwards have dropped off by 0.7%. So that's all players in the game. The game hasn't changed that much. But actually, these small differences have a huge difference to the overall FPL game if we look at it through the template sort of lens. So we have to remember that there's only a tiny sample of players in the actual game that we're interested in within the whole available base. It's the same analysis as the 100 club stuff I did last year when I was looking at the amount of players who are actually kind of viable as FPL managers. So Anthony, Steve, there are 702 players currently available in Fantasy Premier League. How many, or maybe what percentage of them, have scored more than 1 point? You're a bit quiet, Anthony.
Can I make a guess?
Yep, guess a percentage.
60%.
Okay.
I'm gonna go at 75%.
Oh, I think Steve just edges it. So so 497 players of the 702 have scored 1 point, or at least 71%. 10 points. How many have scored more than 10 points?
53%.
53%. Steve?
I'm gonna say 45%.
Anthony says this one. So 54% of players have scored more than 10 points. And finally, more than 50 points. How many players have scored more than 50 points and would thus be perhaps in consideration for FPL managers?
I'd say it's still probably like 41%.
I go at 35.
Actually, only 21%.
Oh, wow.
So only 145 players have scored more than 50 points. There are a few honourable exceptions, of course, who wouldn't be in this that we would still kind of consider, like Coutinho. But basically, 79% of players are junk, useless. We don't care about them. And so only 1 in 5 players in the whole available FPL base is actually relevant to us. And that means that those huge shifts, those small shifts that I showed you earlier, if you magnify the sample, become incredibly important. I'm afraid at this point, I ran out of time due to work reasons to do any more analysis. I didn't have time to work out the rest of the analysis. I'm sorry about that. I'll present that data at a later point, I promise. But suffice to say, what I started to see before I realized my lunch break was over was that 1% of drop off in the overall data set is magnified exponentially if we deal with that smaller data set. And when we come to our template lens, look at kind of players which actually matter to us, we do certainly see that forwards, for example, have fallen off a cliff in terms of the kind of the live sample of forwards. And that translates into a few things that I think are true of this season. Big at the back, small up top. Always Captain Salah, and I think a rather clear template. 3 probably findings that we've spoken about to some extent, but 3 things that I think provide the main backdrop to what this season has been. And today, I guess we're going to talk about these 3 questions and discuss about the future as well. So to look at big at the back / small at the front, will this trend continue? Will we keep seeing small at the front be a thing? Will the forwards ever recover, as Lucy Hynett predicted a few weeks ago? Always Captain Salah, ? Is that going to continue when he's back from AFCON? And in terms of the template, are there any nominations for emerging bandwagons that will smash that template? Let's move into the first one, which is big at the back. And I believe we're going to illustrate that with correspondence, aren't we, Anthony?
Yes, correspondence came into whogottheassist@gmail.com in early December, and we've only gone around to getting this one in now between COVID game weeks, quick turnaround pods where we just excluded the correspondence section entirely, and just general fussing from myself and Tom. It meant that Bryn Stewart's email, a very well thought out email, discussing about the difficulty he was having with his tripled up Chelsea defence and the likes of having Mendy, Rudiger and James, as well as Cancelo and TAA, and whether this big at the back was going to work for him. And he presciently predicted that it was probably time to bail out on Chelsea at that time, I think, which was December 6th. And I hope he did so, because it would have worked out better for him, because he'd already started to take a hammering as a Chelsea defence owner at that point. But the real question that he really was posing to us in this was just, is it time to get out of big at the back? Like, is it going to end? And I think Bryn was definitely onto something at that point, and it's an interesting one to discuss for us. So thanks, Bryn, for emailing whogottheassist@gmail.com. This is effectively the correspondence section for this particular podcast. So yeah, whogottheassist@gmail.com. We might read your email within 2 months.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, sorry, Bryn, but I think that's a nice way of introducing it. At least it's big at the back here to stay. I think the kind of the thin red line which has gone through the season has been Trent and Cancelo in terms of big at the back. Are they nil forevermore? But I think we are seeing a few things kind of occur here. We're seeing Robertson come back into the meta with 3 decent games to come for Liverpool, and it looks like this evening, leaked by one of the Liverpool kind of accounts that tends to be fairly reliable on Twitter, that they will have a Norwich and Leeds double game week in game week 26. We've also got the likes of Luca Dean staking a claim. Anthony, you're sporting a Laporte over there. And this also, as I said earlier, cannibalizes money from the front line. So on my wildcard, for example, I've only got one forward who costs more than 5.2 million. That's Harry Kane. So I just, forwards at the moment, I feel like a bit of a dead zone, effectively, and you've got likes of Luca Dean and things like that as well. Steve, I mean, do you think the bigger the back is here to stay? Can you see Trent and Cancelo ever moving out, and do you think people will push more money back to the likes of Robertson?
I was just kind of thinking there as you were talking, like, I think I've spent most this season with 4 premiums in defense. I've had Trent Cancelo and a Chelsea defender, and I suppose at times then I've had Chilwell and I've had Alonso in recent weeks, which hasn't gone so well. And then I've had Mr. Livramento there as well. But I think, like, looking forward in particular, I was planning out, like, if I was to be wildcarding this week, what defenders would I be looking at? I think Trent and Cancelo, like, that's just a no-brainer. Effective ownership alone, I don't think you can look past them. I think after that is now a question mark. And I think this week in particular for defenders will be a very popular move. A lot of people will have Alonso. Some might even still have James on their benches, but I think a lot of people will be making a defensive move this week. I've spent way too long going through the numbers because this is the never-ending game week. And I've come to the conclusion that for me personally, I think it's Lucas Dean. I really like how Target has gone to Newcastle now as well, which kind of removes that thread of rotation. But, like, would you classify him as a premium? He's like 5.1 million. So he's probably a mid-price, I suppose. I do like the idea of Robertson, and I would like to have Robertson, but I think with Salah coming back, we all have Jota. Unless it looks like Jota's time is going to be reduced, it's very hard to make room for Robertson. And I suppose the other premiums that a lot of people are talking about is like a double up on Man City. The Laporte move, obviously worked out very well for owners this week. And I think like Laporte and Diaz, I think for the next 3 fixtures in particular, are very appealing. But yeah, I suppose I think it's here to stay, but I think you can get away with 2 of the premiums and say 2 of the mid-price players, which spoiler alert for the transfers, I think is where I'll be going myself personally.
I think I'd be in agreement with you on that, Steve, that I think whilst big at the back earlier in the season tended to mean big on players that were quite expensive at the back, I think now we're definitely seeing those players in the, let's say, Digne mold of, in terms of how much he costs. Even Laporte, you could kind of toss into this category as well, like relatively affordable, easy to get in defenders, as opposed to someone that's, pushing 6 and 6 and a bit mil, who is much harder to fit into your defense. Maybe if Robertson continues to push in tandem with Trent Alexander-Arnold to the point that we feel that we need to double up on the Liverpool wing backs a la 2 or 3 seasons ago, we may find that we're starting to put the sort of budget that we had been putting into the defense, just allocating it in a slightly different way between 4 players with 2 really expensive 7s, and then 7 and a bits, and then 2 at 5 million. But at the end of the day, it would work out the same way as 4 6s at that point, or 3 6s and 1 7 or whatever. It's relatively close to the same thing, and that's where I think we're going with big at the back. Certainly, and this is a theme which has definitely arisen in multiple pods at this point. Defenders are so frequently midfielders at this point that we just have to consider them for their attacking prowess, even beyond their clean sheet potential, for example. And that's why the likes of Cancelo and that's why the likes of Trent are so omnipresent in people's teams at this point, because they are just really cheap midfielders who, for their value, who just have this alternative point stream in defensive points as well, which obviously supplements their returns greatly. And that's why I think big at the back is here to stay. It's just like the big teams are so strong, they will consistently churn out clean sheets, and players that are classified as defenders are playing so far forward that they can get returns on a fairly consistent scale. And Digne, just as since he came up in conversation, I feel will be part of this. Like I even noted on Fix have this feature Consensus 11, which kind of, they've kind of aggregated a bunch of top managers and kind of figured out what their squad would look like if you blended them all together with, technological things to put it all together. And basically Digne is already in the Consensus 11 that they have. I just thought that was quite interesting because he certainly has looked good, to be honest, in that Villa setup under Gerrard already. And I can kind of understand that, especially obviously with fixtures to be added in.
And target going, as Steve mentioned, is huge. I mean, because that eliminates any sort of threat to his position. I mean, I've got actually an interesting kind of thing there as well, because you said about defenders being midfielders. I wonder whether we treat them as being commoditized, transferable assets in the same way we do midfielders too nowadays. Because in the past, we've always thought, defenders, unless like a goalkeeper transfer, well, no one ever does one of those. Don't do them unless you're me and you do 5 in the season. I think I'm on number 5 now. Yeah, I mean, number 6 as well, and I get rid of De Gea, but it's number 5 right now. But surely with defenders, we might start thinking about that a little bit. So, I mean, at the moment in my wildcard, for example, I've got Robertson sat. Well, I will have Robertson sat there, and he'll be there for Leicester, Burnley, Norwich, and perhaps double game weeks also for 3 game weeks. Then he's got a blank in 27, and then his fixtures, they're okay, but not great. What I was considering, if we're thinking about midfield defenders as being midfielders and thus players who want to switch around with the fixtures, if then he disappears and becomes, I don't know, a Chelsea defender, a Chelsea wing back. Reece James should be back by then. And Chelsea have got a great run between 28 and 33. Obviously, I need to manage 27. But between 28 and 33, Chelsea don't play any top 6 team. They do have, obviously, the Champions League, but they've got double game weeks to come. So, I mean, that could be another way that this season might change a little bit, that we might see some sort of switching around with a few defenders outside. I think Steve mentioned it earlier, worth just mentioning. I don't think we'll see Cancelo and Trent disappear anytime soon, just because of the EO. If Cancelo does start to be rotated to hell, then maybe. But I can't see that happening.
Even just to compound on what you were saying further about the extent to which, if we're treating defenders as midfielders, then maybe we should start to transfer them as such as well. And yeah, there's definitely a point in that, because defenders, whilst not as set and forget as goalkeepers in kind of standard, FPL done thing, certainly they were much more concrete in size. But also there was the whole idea about not captaining defenders. And that's definitely not the case anymore. I think you saw people looking to captain defenders quite actually relatively frequently in the period while Salah has been away. I've done it. I think I did it twice.
Yeah, you do a trend, didn't you? I mean, did you do Cancelo? I don't know whether you. I don't think you did.
Certainly considering it. Maybe I didn't. But
you did Bruno this week, yeah.
It was it actually was. I ended up going with Bruno. You're correct. But me considering that didn't seem like a mad idea. And indeed, just looking at Twitter and indeed just looking at some of the polls, you do see the defenders starting to feature a lot more prominently in those captaincy polls than they ever did before. And I think there is just a broad realization that defenders need to be treated differently. And I guess, look, while we're on defenders, we might as well mention one of our countrymen, Stephen.
Absolutely. And I think like we're talking about big at the back, but I think it's a big shame that our fellow Irishman, Mr. Matt Doherty, didn't manage to get his move. 4.7 million, he could have been a fantastic option. But can we just get you to say his name there once more, Tom, for all those that enjoyed this?
I don't know what you're talking about. Let's move on to let's see the next
trap. We've been foiled.
To the next section, which is I've been trying. People have been tempted to trap me in meetings all day. I'm completely cognized to that right now. Anyway, next big section. Mo Salah. Do we always captain Salah. And what's been interesting as well, similar to you, Steve, my decline in form, in inverted commas, has been very much due to the fact I've had to make decisions which aren't just lump the captaincy on Salah. I mean, I was singing the algo's praises, and Anthony quite rightly pointed out, well, hasn't the algo just been telling you to captain Salah all year? And wasn't the only time you screwed it up the time you didn't captain Salah, i.e. Kai Havertz? And at the time I was like, no. But I think the reality is, yeah, absolutely.
Peering inside.
Dear God. Anyway, but Salah also capped forever. Looks like Egypt are through to semi-final. Maybe we'll be through to the final. We don't know at the time of recording. We'll see what kind of the overall backdrop is of that. So that might change. When we get him in, might change depending on what we say now. But I still think, that double in 26, Norwich and Leeds at home, that's going to be 300% EO, isn't it? Let's face it. And I guess the first question, I suppose, before we talk about whether this is going to keep going, is just when do you guys kind of plan on getting him in? I did ask Twitter earlier on, in my FPL team, Salah will be ... A few people said will be going nowhere because he never left. So yeah, it's probably a fairly small minority, but there's quite an even split really in terms of when Salah's coming back. So we got over just about 1,700 people responded to this poll. 24% of people said that he'd be coming straight back in for Leicester. 32.4% of people, so this was the majority vote, just about, said he'll be coming back for Burnley in Gameweek 25. 31.7% said he'll be coming back for Norwich in 26, and 12% of people said they don't know, they're not too sure yet. He'll be back later, I'm sure. If you're a serious FPL manager, you'll have Salah at some point, I'm 100% sure. The FOMO, fear of Mo, is so big that I think he will come back in. But there are a few people who aren't sure yet. But basically, the upshot is, what's that? 88% of people, Salah will be back within the next 3 game weeks in my team, and I think I'm probably going to be within that sort of area. I mean, I actually don't have him in my wildcard at the moment. He was in my OFPL wildcard, so I've done a bit of a bomb field there. But if the EO vacuum does come back and is turned on very, very quickly, then maybe I'll get him back quicker. But I'm looking at him for 26 and for the double personally, just as an arse cover. Effectively, I'm gambling that Jota plus Trent plus Robertson can cover me for Leicester and Burnley, and I think I'm probably going to be captaining Kane. I'll come on to him in just a bit next game week, and then Bruno for the double. And I think Salah in 26 is a hard buy. You need to get that to cover that 300% EO. They'll triple captain him or whatever, but I think I've got enough in the tank to cover him for the next 2 weeks, and I've still got my doubts on whenever he comes back that he'll go straight into the team for Leicester. He may do, but I've got my doubts. What do you guys think about Salah? When are you going to get him back? Steve?
I think there's many factors to unpack in what you've just mentioned there, to be honest. I think a lot will depend on how you're fixed for game week 27. I think that is an important factor to start with, because I personally have no Arsenal players. I've only got 2 Liverpool at the moment, and I have no Leicester, and I only have 1 Chelsea who will be gone. So I could get away without playing the free hit in 27 if I'm kind of playing my cards right. But if Salah has his double in 26, I'm obviously going to bring him in for that, which will leave me with 3 Liverpool on the bench in 27, which you could say I should use my free hit. So I think a lot will kind of depend on how people are fixed there. I have a few routes planned out. One is that he comes in 26, and that's probably my most likely way, with Ronaldo making way for him money-wise. The alternative is that I'd lose my 2 Man City midfielders to fund him. So I suppose what's positive is that we can kind of see what happens for the Leicester game, really. The Burnley game, it will be a game where you'll watch it from behind the couch, but I think with Man United having the double, it's hard not to go with Bruno or Ronaldo for captaincy. So you're really only worried about him as a, less than 200% EO for that game week. I suppose just that can answer the question on the poll. For me, as things stand, it'll be 26, but depending on what fixtures get announced in the meantime for 27 and for game week 30, I think that could change my plans as well.
Interesting one for me. I think when I actually first saw the poll, I voted for the back later. I don't know when yet. So I'm part of the whatever it is, 1 in 8 people who just basically gave the show results answer that you provided at the end of that. But the truth for me, I think, is that if at all possible, I think I want to get him in for that Leicester game, purely because Salah has a differential. This is a bit like game week 1, where Salah has even some bit of a differential, would be fantastic to have in my side. And I think that's what he would act as, particularly at my rank right now. And I think there's just an awful lot to be had for that. And then you can also make arguments about how poor Leicester have been defensively for quite a lot of the last while. There's plenty to say that Liverpool could put up a pretty good score at home against Leicester in that first game back. So as long as Salah looks like he's going to be playing in it, I think I'd be doing my best to get him in. Of course, that's contingent on whether he makes the AFCON final or not, then kind of kicks on to what day he finishes up at AFCON, and then that obviously kicks on to how many days training and how many days he's back in England and all the rest of it. But if it does look like he's going to play, yeah, I'd say stick him into the side straight away, reap the rewards of having him as a differential, be that as a captain or just in the side. But yeah, early and often, I would say.
Can I ask you who you'd be bringing him in for in your team, though?
I have both Bruno and Ronaldo right now, so I could shelve Ronaldo and stick extra money into midfield and upgrade someone like, I'll just pick on Jota, for example, and just upgrade him.
So technically you could,
or it could just be Bruno who just gets torched.
Yeah, so you could sell either Bruno or Ronaldo before they play Burnley, and then a double of Southampton and Brighton, which is that kind of sounds like you're playing with fire as well, doesn't it?
Couldn't score against Kidderminster Harriers though at the moment. Like it's like I'm not sure how terrified I am actually of them. I feel like when I've been bitten by FOMO to some extent on Man United this season, I felt like a complete chump because they're just not particularly good going forward, especially if both Bruno and Ronaldo are fit. I was quite excited when Ronaldo wasn't fit because there was a thought that Bruno might have a chance to go wild and United might actually be able to get some pacey counter-attack going, whereas oh no, if they're all there, I don't think it's good at all, to be honest, Steve.
I think just one nota bene about Liverpool. They play on Thursday, and you're basically relying on Klopp giving some information about Salah before the FA Cup, because the deadline would have gone by the time his press conference is likely to be on Wednesday. So if you're buying Salah for that Leicester game and Klopp hasn't said anything and there's been no news from the club about when he's back, that's really a shot in the dark. So it might be a good idea to.
The hope is that you get some clarity. On pitch side almost when things finish up, that people start watching the Jets straight away. Like people will be tracking that jet all the way back to Liverpool. The day after AFCON, and then you might get a bit of clarity.
All right, and also quickly, so I'm going to follow the algo for the rest of the year, I'm sure, and I'm sure that's going to tell me the captain Salah pretty much no matter what. We'll talk about the double game weeks later on and those impacts, but I expect I will just follow the algo and find also Cap Salah is back again. Just quickly from both of you, do you think that era is going to be reinstated, or do you guys think that we've now swapped into kind of a diversity of armband options? Steve, what do you reckon?
I think it'll be reinstated as the kind of default captain, but I think what will make the end of the season a lot more interesting is that there will be teams that will have double game weeks, albeit you could have the likes of this week where you've got, say, the likes of Watford that have a double. But like, for example, if we have Burnley that have 2 tasty looking fixtures, would you be tempted to go with Nick Pope, or would you be tempted to go with their new striker? I won't try and say his name. Or would you prefer, say, something like if Salah is at home to West Ham? I know, like, depending on where I am in my overall rank, like, you'd be tempted to go with double game weeker. And I think that will change the kind of default of, like, it being Salah every week, but like that we had at the start of the season. But I do think that he will be my default. And I think, like, if you're to set your bus team every week, I'll be putting Salah as my captain. And then as the week progresses, I'll kind of consume some content. I'll start looking at those algos and that kind of stuff and see if they can change my mind, I suppose.
Agree completely, Anthony?
Very little to add to that, yeah.
Very little to add to that. Perfect. All right. Last thing So as we said, the template this year has been fairly well established. So I suppose one of the key sort of antidotes to that is bandwagons. And we've seen lots of examples of this in the past, so like Lingard, for example, say an example. Allied to that, of course, the transfer window slammed shut. You can't say it closed. It's slammed shut on Monday. And we had a couple of questions in about this as well. So Richard Pitt, he asked, which January transfer will make the biggest impact in FPL? And FPL Kubeloy, would you rather have one Woot Weghorst and another Woot Weghorst, or would you rather have one Wood? But he really asked, what's the difference between the two? Any interesting? Basically, a proxy for what's going on. I think here, though, it might be worth just kind of talking about some options that could smash that template which emerge. I'm going to start off with one. So I mentioned Kane earlier on. Is he a differential? Well, he's 13.6% owned, so kind of. We were all aware of him, but not many people actually own him, I don't think. And I just wonder if, with a rush to Salah, people are saving the transfers for him, and that innate Bruno ownership and people sat on Ronaldo, of course, that double in 25. I just think he might be overlooked a little bit because it's a bit of an awkward move to make, isn't it? At this point, you're waiting for Ronaldo, for Salah to come through, that double to go away, and all that sort of malarkey. I talked about him in my FPL video actually, and got roundly rubbished for it, but they rubbish anyone. But I don't know. To the eye, I think he looks like he gives a crap again, frankly, running at defenders and actually doing stuff. Like the analog stats is pretty incredible over the last 6 game weeks. He's had the most big chances, most attempts in the box by miles, and the most pen box touches of any player. And in the expected data as well, he's miles in front of everybody else for expected goal involvement over the last 6. It's 5.51. Bowen is the closest from 3.99. And Spurs are leading the way quite substantially in terms of XG from open play over the last 6 game weeks with 11. The nearest rivals, United with 8. So it's a huge difference between the two. And it's not really an overperformance either for Kane to be doing what he's been doing. He's only overperformed a slight bit. And the really interesting thing to note on Kane is that each season since 2017-18, when StatsBomb started recording his data, he's drastically overperformed on his actual output versus XG. This year, it's the opposite. It's the only season that this has happened where he's underperformed his actual output versus his XG. I mean, people always say, oh, he's going to revert to the mean soon. Well, the reversion to the mean for Kane is actually quite a good thing that he flips it. And given the kind of finisher he is, and with a deep-lying playmaker and deep liar, I suppose, in Bettencourt joining, plus another quality player in Kulusevski to play with, I wonder whether he might morph from Harry Kane to Harry Kane, might morph into Harry Kane from Harry Kante. And a small point as well, the last 2 game weeks, his average position was the furthest forward it has been all season. So just maybe, a Conte system is starting to work for him. And as I said, I really like the look of him. I don't think that many people are going to own him because of the kind of the quite choked premium situation at the moment. And I might well captain him against Southampton and gamble on that high line issue again for Hasenhüttl. Anyway, that's just one of that's my first nominee for the potential bandwagon. What do you guys think of that? Any others? Any that have come to mind for you? I've got loads, but that's kind of my main one at the moment. And obviously that's confirmation bias because he's straight in my wildcard.
Kane, when it came to the elite, more expensive premium players that haven't necessarily been performing, Kane was one of the first ones that I'd have turned to. And if it wasn't Kane, it would have been Son. That it just in general, things seem to be coming together for Spurs. And Kane, as we've said, we noted it in the last pod that Kane was beating players. He was sprinting. He was forward. All things that weren't necessarily happening earlier in the season. Like it's kind of ridiculous that these are the sorts of things that the eye test was, wow, it's changed so much. But actually, really, that was the truth of it, that Kane has looked so much better and has been really threatening. And so with that in mind, there's no point going into very small data sources or data points on, a few performances, but just in general, eye test wise, energy, and tactically, he has looked much, much better. And that's why I was definitely kind of watching him closely. I'm not sure if this game week was one I was going to bring him in for. It's interesting, Tom. If you're on a wild card, I could totally see why you would, though. It does make sense.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of on that too. I think I've mapped out a little bit of a I think not having Salah has been stressful for the captaincy. So I've kind of planned out a little kind of captaincy matrix from now to game week 29. And what's interesting is that Kane is ranked either first or second every single game week. And I think, like, for this coming game week, I think if I had Kane, I'd be very tempted to stick the armband on them when there's no obvious captain. And then I think even looking at, game week 25 will be different because we'll have the double, and game week 26 we'll have Salah as captain. But I think Son and Kane is who I have down as my second best captain for game week 27, 28, and 29. Really like the fixtures, really like that they have the lower ownership as well. And I think that really stands out for someone that's on a wildcard that can kind of take those punts, and the fact that Son's back in training as well. But there's two players that stand out, and I was shocked when I heard their ownership, or I saw their ownership on an article this week, because they're both sitting in my own squad at the moment. And I just didn't realize that I had two pretty low owned players that could kind of bode me well in the coming weeks. One is Phil Foden. He's got 8% ownership and really, really nice fixtures. So I'm very hopeful of him, but at the same time, he could be on the bench for the next two games.
Very hopeful that he'll actually play.
Exactly. And he could be on the bench for the next 2 weeks, but at the same time, like, he could score a hat-trick against Brentford, and I could be a genius there, But that's one player that I was kind of shocked by his ownership and the fact that he's in my squad. And I think if he is benched, I'll just be kind of selling him for Salah. The second is Calvert-Lewin. Calvert-Lewin, I think he's got less than 5% ownership. Lampard's coming in. They've got Newcastle, Leeds, and Southampton in the next 3. If he's gonna do anything, he's got the fixtures, he's got the new manager bounce. He's already played 2 or 3 games since come back from injury, albeit he hasn't scored. But that's the kind of 2 players that are in my squad that are, I suppose, bandwagon, or that you can call, if they go well with the low ownership, that they could turn into bandwagons as well.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the new signings for Everton, Dele Alli and Van der Beek, I'd be interested. The jury is very much out on how that's going to work with the two of them. Has Lampard basically signed Lampard and Gerrard for his own team? And that'd be very interesting to see. Let's look at a few other players. So, Mr. Kobaloy mentioned Wout Weghorst, and I think that's actually a really interesting one. So, obviously, the immediate few games for Burnley are absolutely trash. You're not going to be interested in Burnley for the time being. That's for damn sure. Their fixtures are just not really worth looking at.
So bad.
Yeah, Man United and Liverpool, 24 and 25. Forget about it. Not interested. But there will obviously be a moment when all those sort of rearranged fixtures do come to pass with loads of mini Burnley double game weeks. Hooray. And we should probably discuss quickly the unvaccinated Horsey, just because his record's pretty good. I'd looked at FBref, 1 goal every 2 games is his career output. And in the Bundesliga in 2020-21, Weghorst was actually 4th. Yes, 4th for non-pen XG for the whole league, although he played on average 250 minutes more than everybody else around him, being ever present for Wolfsburg, 20 goals and 5 assists that season. But I said that career average of a goal every game is decent. And now you've got Dwight McNeil, Matt Lowton, and Charlie Taylor swinging in the crosses, mate. I mean, it's goals on it's basically like 3 goals, isn't it? But anyway, I mean, I think at his price, which is fairly generous, and Burnley, I think from game week 29, things really clear up for them in terms of like initial fixtures. But I mean, there could be a double game week anywhere, and I just think he will come into conversation at some point. And it could be that he is one of those players, alongside Cornet, who ends up in our teams at any given moment effectively. So I don't know. I think maybe it would be him of the new signings that will make the. No, actually, no. I'll hold that one back. Maybe he'll make the second biggest impact in FPL, I think.
Oh, you're teasing us about this. Your wildcard, are we, Tom?
He's trying to build suspense, is for sure. But
he's not in there. You know, it's just Kane. I've got someone better in my wildcard. We'll see that later.
With Weghorst, really, it is just without a prospect. You can imagine whatever you want from him right now. Because Burnley have so many games, they're almost like some sort of Schrodinger's club Like they are both relegated and mid-table at the same time, depending on what you want to think is going to happen with the 4 fixtures that they have to play. And just kind of more generally, Weghorst, you have the question of, are you going to apply a massive Bundesliga discount on his goals that he was scoring fairly consistently for Wolfsburg? Or do you think that the types of goals that he was scoring, frequently headed, frequently penalties, that they're the type of goals that he will be scoring at Burnley anyway? And so, do you know what? Lob him in and hope that lads lob in the ball at him and he heads it in. And I think there's plenty of room to be optimistic about him, especially in a world where the strikers have been underperforming as much as they have. He'd be more interesting to me than any of the other Burnley players, large except for maybe defenders. I think I'd go for a defender faster than I'd go for Pope when it comes to the rest of the Burnley team. But it hasn't been great so far this season for them, even defensively. So I think I'd look forward rather than look back faster, even if he is a completely unknown quantity in the Premier League.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Bruno Guimaraes, I don't think he's not really worth speaking about. Obviously, we mentioned Chris Woods and Newcastle. I think let's leave that for the time being. See what happens there. He is a new signing still. Just about Philippe Coutinho. I think that he is one that many people are being drawn to as a potential next gen Lingard. I mean,
great eye-catching goal as well for Brazil.
Yeah, oh God, what a hit that was! It opened his body right up, didn't he? Brilliant. What do you make of Coutinho, Steve?
I was just going to say, I think that if we're looking at who could be the next bandwagons, I do think that an Aston Villa attacker could be the next bandwagon, be it Buendia, Coutinho, Watkins. I think one of those 3 is going to bang in the next few weeks. Like they've got Leeds, Newcastle, Watford, Brighton, Southampton. Like that's a beautiful run right up to game week 29. Love the look at Coutinho in that short glimpse that we saw of him when he came off the bench. I think I prefer Buendia as a pick. I was looking through a few of the stats because I was tempted by Coutinho last week, but to be honest, I think I'm going to wait and see with him. And I think Watkins could come in for me in place of Ronaldo in a few weeks' time as well, if I am going to free up money for Salah. But in the midfield, I do like Buendia, and I think I was looking between Buendia and Rafinha as a potential guy to come in, and that's something that I'm kind of torn on. But there's one other left field pick that if he could nail down the place of Gray or Townsend in the Everton team is Anwar El Ghazi. He's just a guy that I just love watching him play, and you can flag me all you want, but he's so greedy. Like I just love that. Like every time he gets the ball, he shoots. And I ran the numbers. I was doing a post on Instagram I was looking at the new Everton mids, and I compared Ali, El Ghazi, and Van de Beek. Extremely exciting options there. But the clear potential of all those guys, if they get the minutes, which is the big caveat, is El Ghazi, because he's loves shooting.
But it's all fun though too.
Remember in pre-season, I was tipping El Ghazi for Villa's first good 3 games at the start of the season, and was getting dogs abuse for it, and then I didn't go with it in the end. Got even more abuse.
Yeah, exactly. You got to follow through to do something like that. Now, I'm glad you said Emi Buendia, because long-term listeners of the pod will know that he's a real favourite of mine throughout the years. He's played his way into my heart, and he's only 1.2% owned. I've got him in my wildcard team, and I think he's definitely ticked up a level since Coutinho has arrived. It's just a feeling. It's just an eye test, really. I feel like he's got someone else who's creative to play with now. He's got a creative friend to play with in Coutinho, and I looked at kind of his data. It's a bit ropier than the Kane one, but I looked at his data for the last 6 matches versus 6 preceding it, and it is really night and day. So you've got threefold number of pen box touches, double number of shots, and also just an eye test point. If Coutinho and Watkins form the front 3, they're going to need a creator, because Coutinho shoots. That's what he does. He doesn't really create very much. All the crap about Coutinho being the most creative player you've ever seen. Absolute BS. Come on, you don't know football. Watkins hits the post a lot, but someone's going to need to feed those guys, right? And Buendia, I think, could be the man at 6.2, just 6.2. One fun fact on Buendia, he was 11th for XA last time he was in the Premier League with Norwich. and created the most chances of any player over the last 6 game weeks of that ill-fated 2019-20 season. And he created the 6th most chances overall. There's clearly a good player in there, and I really want him to come through. And I've still got him in my wildcard team. And people have been going, "Oh, you sure you want Buendia?" I'm like, non-negotiable. Mate, I'd even lose Cody before I lost Buendia.
Nobody arranges deck chairs on a sinking ship like Amy Buendia.
He's just so good. Anyway, we've got to just quickly, we used up a lot of time here. I mentioned one more player. I think Luis Diaz, people are going to be looking at him, 8 million. Qualitatively, it looks like his breakthrough season. I think that there will be a bit of an impact of him this year. He's not going to be first choice in that Liverpool front three, that's for damn sure. But I think he will share minutes with the entire Liverpool front three, not because he'll be playing in all across it, but because there will be a lot of movement around because of him being there. The vast majority of his recorded appearances, 96% of his 161 appearances referenced on Transfermarkt, showed that he played on the left, either left mid or left winger. So that's Mane's spot nominally, right? But Mane can play on the right, he can play up front, and there's interchangeability effectively amongst Liverpool's front three, as we've seen with Jota and Firmino. And I think Salah, it can play up front, Mane can play up front, Mane can play on the right. So more options for Klopp. Another elite option for Klopp, which isn't Minamino, which isn't Origi, I think makes it a bit more tricky for us actually, having this 4th elite player who's going to start to be kind of tooled up, introduced to the Premier League, could be have the biggest knock-on effect of all, I think, of all the transfers in. Not because of who he is, but because of the impact he could have. I think maybe you'll probably still see Salah play loads of games, but having a player who, for all intents and purposes, looks pretty elite, Liverpool don't mess around. If they're going to buy a player like that, Spurs thought they got him. Liverpool hijacking that deal to perfection, everything done in 24 hours. They must think something of him. I think that he could potentially next year be a fantastic player, but this year I think he's going to have a big impact on our teams because he's going to sweep up some minutes basically for the likes of Jota and Salah.
Don't see him starting many games though in the next while. Klopp has just had a bit of a habit of kind of having players go through a recalibration period.
It's stealing minutes though, isn't it? And that's what's important. And he's attuned to that, and he still needs to play in order to learn how the press works.
Yeah, no,
and it does give and it does give people that go with the early wild card the option of going double Liverpool defense and Salah are like a placeholder for Salah, because if you believe that the new signing will reduce Jota's minutes, they now have 5 guys for 3 positions. It could be a smart move to go with Robertson, Trent, especially as we don't have any Chelsea defenders until game week 28. I think there is a little period now of 3 games where it's Leicester, Burnley, and then a double. That's a lovely little patch for anyone on a wild card this week.
Absolutely. No, I think definitely it is intriguing, but I think for all the January transfers and everything, I think the question still comes back to how it impacts on the Salah question, because that just goes back to how we're going to structure our teams and even which of these players that might fit into our squads. The likes of how you look at, maybe putting your money towards Robertson, or maybe you try to shove more money forward towards the likes of Weghorst, probably not in the weeks to come, but soon to come. And other players. It is kind of interesting. Liverpool seem to be the battleground, and getting Liverpool right seems to be what we're all identifying as being the key to doing well over the next 3 to 4 game weeks. A, because obviously they have good fixtures, but B, because there is just an element of precarity with their star player, and maybe where the points are going to be allocated and the goals are going to be allocated in that team in the next while.
Oh, well, I think let's bring that section to a close. Good discussion there. In summary, we think big at the back will continue. Always Captain Salah will continue. 4 and 5 managers, and 2 and 3 of us will be getting him back with him, but at least for that Norwich game. Anthony may go sooner, and maybe Kane could lead the forwards back to fruition. Maybe Weghorst would. But could the biggest impact of all be Luis Diaz signing for Liverpool to curtail minutes for all the players up front that we know and love? And also, of course, Buendia is the best player in the world. Right, let's take a break there, and we'll come back to the questions and obviously transfers and captains and stuff just after this. Right, so we're back, and it's time for the correspondence and listeners' questions. So the correspondence actually already gone, niftily inserted into the main topic, I might say so myself. A smooth segue in. Bit of a dead zone on Twitter, but we did manage to rustle up a few questions by cajoling, bribery, and all the other things the British government get up to. The first kind of pair of questions are on double game week management, and I think maybe they're a bit of a hangover from how bad this double game week has been. We mentioned obviously at the start that we haven't fared too much better either. FPL Tom Jones, it's not unusual that he messages in, that's for sure, says that we haven't been burnt. We've been burnt by double game week before. So as double game week 25 it's only confirmed for lackluster double in Man United and Brighton. His question is it a boat worth catching, or is it worth kind of setting course for 26 and beyond rather than kind of buying into United right now? And Karam Tizir, he writes in and says, Watford has been a huge lesson for me. And if anything, it shows we shouldn't overvalue some double game week teams. How do you reduce a double game week fever in bad form teams? And obviously loads of mini double game weeks on the horizon. Will we go there again? Or should we consider more of them overrated? So I'm sure I'm not sure we as a collective whole will ever be able to end up kind of falling prey to some form of double game week FOMO. I'm probably going to find it difficult, for example, if I owned Salah and Bruno in game week 25, I'd find it very difficult to not captain Bruno despite Salah having a good game. I think that's just the way it is. And there's also a matter of outcome bias here. So if you, like me, captains Antonio, Ronaldo, and Dennis over the last 3 game weeks, your outlook is going to be mightily different compared to if you captained Bowen, Bruno, and King. And I hugely suspect that Karam and Tom both fall into the category of the former, like me. I mean, yeah. What do you guys think of this one? Steve, start with you.
I think there's a Tom Jones song called I'll Never Fall in Love Again, and I think it's kind of very apt for this answer. It's nice to say that we'll never fall in love with these kind of double game week options, and especially like when they're less popular teams and all. But in reality, I think it's one of those things in FPL that whenever there's a double game week, it's just so hard not to go for it. I have a feeling that we're all going to have Wout Weghorst as our striker at some stage of the season, and he'll be captain for a double or kind of treble game week. I suppose to your point of when we talked about will Salah be the perma captain, or will we be going for anybody else? I think there's merit in saying we'll be going for Salah as the auto captain, but in reality, if there's a double game week, I'm probably going to be swaying towards that option for my captain. So I think I'm with the masses here.
I think maybe let's take it out of this immediate though. I mean, Karen does mention the minis on the horizon, for example. I mean, at what point is the tipping point? Like, if it's a Burnley double game week versus a decent single game week for Salah, do you just say, you know what, I'm going to ignore the running horses, the running weak horses, and just kind of go with a single game week Salah? If it's a double game week for, I don't know, Spurs, and Salah's got a good single game week, do you say, all right, I'm staying with Salah? What's the tipping point for you?
Yeah, I think game week 25 could be a great example there, because if Salah comes back in 24 against Leicester, if he comes on for, say, the last half an hour, say he gets a goal, he looks sharp. Game week 25, he's playing Burnley, whereas Man United, who are in poor form, Ronaldo can't hit a barn door. Bruno won't score because Ronaldo will be on the pitch. Will we be captaining a Man United asset against Southampton and Brighton, or will we be going with Salah, who's in form, against Burnley, who are not great? Personally, I'll probably end up going for the Man United option, because suppose I'd take that chance. But there will be others, I suppose, who, well, to be fair, Tom, you could be one of those who, if Mikel's algorithm tells you to go with Salah, you're going to be going with Salah, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously there's a judgment call to be made. I suspect that Mikel would still factor in the likelihood of the individual. I think if it was, say, a double game week for Burnley versus a decent single for Salah, Salah would still come out on top. I think that's probably fairly justified. I think it's when you get to kind of, I mean, Spurs is probably a bit of an extreme example, but when you get to, I don't know, Villa having a double game week, Palace having a double game week, it's very hard for that's when it becomes a bit more kind of borderline whether an Edouard captain or a Watkins or Buendia captain becomes the one to do. Buendia is never rated very highly on Mikel, and for good reason. He's just a bit of a favourite pick.
Wow, it's almost like he's barely returned in the 2 seasons he's been in the Premier League.
But his underlying data is great, Anthony. It's all about the expected data, not the actual point, not the actual things he's done. Have we learned nothing from Analytics FC?
Good Trossard next week.
No, I'd be quite fearful of these double game weeks to come, to be honest. I'm not sure they'll have good outcomes for Burnley, for example. And whilst I think I'd like to get the players from the double game week teams into my side and kind of increase my exposure to the double game week, I wouldn't necessarily jump to make sure that I'm captaining as well. Like, I'd rather have 2 double game week players from a team and, do my best to get the good points that club might get, rather than kind of put all my eggs in one player and captain them as well. If I was to get, 2 points or 2, players point streams rather than just one doubled. And for example, even when United had a double game week in 22, I still went and captained Trent Alexander-Arnold because I felt objectively, with the fears of Bruno and Ronaldo crossing over each other and cancelling each other out, I felt that it was just safer to just go with my Liverpool player. And so I got Fernandes into my side. I had Ronaldo in my team, but I captained Trent Alexander-Arnold on that basis. And I could see myself doing something like that again with the double game weeks that I could end up with, for example, since you were talking about Villa, not with Buendia, but with, let's say, Coutinho and also Watkins in my side. Or a defender like I have Konsa already. I might just kind of find my ways to double up that way, but I wouldn't necessarily rush to captain. At the same time, I do feel like double game week shouldn't be ignored. And I'm, even if Watford hasn't proven to be a massive success so far, 1 goal from a well-owned double game week Watford player, be it King or be it João Pedro, whatever, in the Burnley game will kind of change how people perceive the current disaster with Watford. And indeed, if Ben Foster just doesn't play, people will be just happy enough that it wasn't a total disaster and people could move on from there.
Yeah, I just think, scarcity is so important in creating value around these double game weeks. It really is. And in the past, we haven't really had that many double game weeks. And where we've had it, we've gone with it because it's been, it's been exciting, it's been new, and we still see echoes of that. And for example, going with King and Dennis, although of course you can say the opposite, that if Dennis had scored a hat trick, I would not be sitting here saying this. But I just wonder whether the ensuing barrage of doubles, mini doubles, might mean that we're more measured about them because we're more used to them. And as they become more regular, I think that maybe we're going to increasingly see them, unless it's like a really nice double game week for a big team, as a nice to have rather than a must. Right. Anything else here, or should we move on to the next one?
All good.
All good. All right. Next thing, transfer targets, and a couple of shout outs too. So Benny Blanco, here lads, it would be priority transfers per position for the next 2 to 3 game weeks. I need to mention here, contractually obliged under the pain of lots of really embarrassing photos being released of me, the Benny Blanco is hosting Game Week 39 North versus South, which is being held on the weekend after the last weekend of the season. I need to look up when that is because I didn't prepare for that. I'm really sorry, Benny. Don't release those photos. Please don't. Those photos they're not that exciting, I promise. I think it's going to be, I think it's the 28th of May, the Saturday in Birmingham. So if you want to go to Birmingham to see a load of FPL people, you can hang out with loads of bearded men in Birmingham. Go and do that. I can't make it, sadly. So probably that mean more of you go. All the money that you do put towards it to buy your ticket will go directly to charity. Very, very nice idea. There's a team of people in the FPL community from the north, although FPL Elf, who's not from the north, is managing the northern team for LOLs, and from the south are involved with this. I think that our good friends James and Suj are both playing for the south, which is going to be hilarious. So it would be well worth going if you can. And look up Benny Blanco on Twitter, and you can find out all about that that on there. I'd also recommend that you look up. I can't remember what the account name is. I think it's there's a Northern account on the Twitter which is creating a lot of very funny memes about individuals on Twitter, which is quite funny indeed. At the North GW39, definitely worth looking up if you're into that Twitterverse nonsense. But yeah, definitely look up to Benny Blanco about this. Anyway, he did ask who would be your priority transfers for the next 2 to 3 game weeks in each position. And Tom Campbell asked, he asked the question, basically I asked him to, so I could talk about the Bristol meetup, which is on the 8th, 19th of February at the King Street Brewhouse in Bristol. So if you want to come to that, I'll be there because I'll be there visiting my grandparents. And I thought, you know what, I might as well do a meetup. Come and let me know on Twitter. And it's also one in London. It's becoming bigger and bigger via FPL Nima. But Tom asked basically, could there be interest in the 4.3 million goalkeeper in Raya, who might be of interest to wildcarders? But I mean, let's stick to Benny Blanco's question because, frankly, Tom's question is just a segue into mentioning Bristol. Priority transfers in each position, an interesting one, really, because I think a lot of people are going to be kind of homing in on that. I mean, Steve, we've got a question in a minute about replacing Chelsea defenders, so maybe say you a bit for them. But I mean, Anthony, what do you think about that per position?
Per position, it's kind of interesting that we're cutting it down to the next 2 to 3 game weeks. It kind of strikes me as
I think it's head of the blank.
Heavily based on the blank. And so I guess with that, I think Liverpool players are going to dominate the considerations here. So a priority transfer, for example, would have to be Salah, considering he's probably not in many of our sides at the moment. And whilst it's very obvious, I'd have to throw it in there. When you go from there, then I think you'll want to get players in for the United double game week or the Brighton double game week. More so the Brighton one for me. Because I just suspect those are transfers that people will need to make. So who would I be looking at? I had Mopé in my team. I think Mopé could well come back into my team in the next few weeks, and I'd consider him. Watkins, just with Villa's fixtures and soon to be added fixtures, I feel like he just provides kind of a good focal point in that attack. Leeds, Newcastle, Watford to come, so he'd be there. And then kind of when I'm looking at defenders, to be honest, if someone isn't doubled up on the City defense, I think I would strongly consider doing that, just because they just continue to churn out the clean sheets when nobody else seems to be doing so. And then Digne is another one that I'd be throwing in for the priority transfers for me personally, because I don't have him in my defense. And whilst I have Konsa, I'm already starting to feel like I wish I'd just taken the risk on Digne, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen with minutes and etc. with him. So it's kind of a scattergun, but concentrated in very few teams there approach for me.
I think I think like I suppose touching on the positions there as well, I agree. And I know Tom said we'll get to it with the Chelsea question, but for me, I think like Cancelo, Trent are a lock in everyone's squad, so we might as well kind of ignore them. But if we stay in a priority in defence, for me it's Dean, and then one of someone like a Kufal or a Cucurella, or even the Spurs defender is what I'm looking at. In midfield, looking at a few priority transfers again. Buendia stands out. Tom will be happy to hear. I think Foden has potential over the next couple of game weeks if he starts. And then I think everyone's going to be on like the Bowens and the Jotas, etc. And up front, nobody. But if I had to put a gun to my head, I think the DCL Watkins could prove as interesting options if you're not going for the premiums of Kane or Ronaldo. But just one point as well there, Tom, you seem like there's lots of meetups happening in the UK over the next few weeks. I think it's about time that we formally started planning one for Dublin as well. So I know that we have a smaller Irish group, the FPL Gals, and we had a meetup in Limerick there a couple of weeks ago. So I think it's about time that before the end of the season, we should try and organize a bigger one, because I know Andy from Let's Talk FPL. I've been speaking to him previously about having one as well, and he's keen. And I know that Mark, FPL General, would be keen to come over as well to have a bit of an Irish get together. And I'm sure.
Do you know what? I had, and Anthony will tell you, I had tickets booked, I had a hotel room booked and everything somewhere can't remember where it was, but for the Dublin meetup before just before the pandemic.
It was up at the top of Harcourt Street. He was saying.
Oh yeah, another one. Yeah, because I was just going to say that I'm sure Paddy FPL Viking will be keen for a pint of Guinness as well. So
yeah, I definitely try to go over if I could for that. For
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, so I think that's something that with with all these ones happening in the UK, that we should try and get one going now before the end of the year.
Make it happen finally.
Exactly.
All right, back to the main question. Outside of our social lives, our busy social lives with lots of bearded men and women too. Not bearded women, but women are involved with the FPL community, of course. And anyone else, of course, any other gender identities we need to say in 2022, all welcome in the fantasy football community. I think I broadly agree on Dean, Robbo, and City in defence. I think maybe I slightly prefer Robbo on my wild cards. I'm looking at the two. We're not benefiting from either Cancelo or Trent clean sheet at the moment. The second City defender is mostly akin to buying the goalkeeper. I mean, Laporte does have some attacking threat, and he's a lot cheaper than Robertson. The only thing is Robertson is able to provide some attacking threat and does have a decent kind of 4-game stretch before I then kind of look to move him out. The only problem is that a wild Chimikas could appear where he's concerned to give him a break. So there could be an outside call maybe for Van Dijk here. Is the only thing I was thinking. I mean, there's always a chance of a goal, basically, and all the set pieces are pretty much aimed at him as being the only big man where Liverpool are concerned. Well, apart from if Matty or Konate is on the pitch. In midfield, I agree. Obviously, Salah is where everyone's kind of lusting towards. Brighton wise, I mean, Trossard's I feel like is the ultimate sharp merchant. Just all fart no poo. There's very very little from him. You'll get one game where he absolutely craps himself all over the place, but normally it's just nothing. I did like McAllister, the cut of McAllister's jib. I just think the positions he's occupying and the way he's affecting the game. Now he's been given consistent game time. A very talented guy. And Brighton fans that I've been speaking to have been waxing lyrical about him, frankly. And obviously did score a couple of goals against Everton in Game 21. I think that was kind of a high watermark for him. I don't think he'll be bracing off anytime soon. But, over the double game week 2022, he got 9 points for his owners at 5.3. That's pretty damn decent. And if Spurs and Brighton both get double game week 26, which could be quite likely, then you might have a double for Brighton as well. And I think that given the way McAllister is playing at the moment, I think he could be quite decent as a pickup. There's obviously, if you want in the defence as well, you can maybe throw in Cucurella. But I just feel like Brighton have a tendency to draw 1-1 every single game, as James talks about a lot. And finally up front, I do like Harry Kane a lot. And I just think there's no value in the forwards right now, really. So I just top for him, sadly, but true. Final questions this week. Replacements. Which Aston Villa player is one to choose if you had to choose one? Christian Ulrichs. I think we've covered that ad nauseam. I think the resounding message is Luca Dean, with maybe a smattering of Buendia from me and Steve, and a frankly ridiculous Watkins call from Anthony. And Jono forward, he asks, what do we do with Rudiger if you own him due to Chelsea in the World Club Cup? I'm sure there are a few people like Steve himself waiting around with Luca Dean. Waiting around with Alonso or something. But I think we've covered this as well. So it brings us nicely to transfers and captains. A bit of as I said, it's quite quiet on Twitter just because people are just relaxing, enjoying. Hopefully this will kickstart it. Exactly, all playing Wordle. I look forward to the day when someone comes out and goes, yeah, one. Anyway, that's not what we talk about here. Talk about transfers and captains. Obviously, we've got a little while to go. Don't know what's going to happen next. But Steve, you've got Emmanuel Dennis. You've got Marcos Alonso with a blank, a couple of blanks. And is it Alonso to Luca Dean? But that still means you've got Dennis out, doesn't it? And you've still got 10 men if you do that. You need Livramento. Are you going to be taking a hit? What's the situation here?
Yeah, so I think a lot can change between now and the deadline next Tuesday. But as things stand, I have 2 free transfers. I have 1.9 million in the bank. I have 3 defenders that won't play. I have Trossard that won't play, but I'll be holding for the possibility of those 2 doubles that it'll have in the following game weeks. I think one transfer that's locked in for me now is Alonso to Dean. We've talked that to death. I think I'm going to be struggling for one more player this game week then. So what stood out to me was either Livramento or Johnston out for another kind of cheaper defender. I went through my options. I ran a bit of the next 6 game weeks on Ben Crellin's transfer planner. And in summary, the defenders are not very exciting. What I came to though was that either Kufal or someone like Eric Dyer probably make the most sense for my team due to they could play this week and they could play, I think it's game week 26 and 28 that I'm going to need them as well. But I saw last night that Livramento is back in training. So that's kind of good news. Although I wouldn't want him this week, but I think it kind of focuses my mind on, like, if you stick to the transfer objectives of getting rid of your weakest links, for me, it's Alonso and Johnston out. So then Dean and somebody in defense. I think what's frustrating is that the one defender that really stands out to me of those options in around 5 million is Cucurella, because he could have those 2 doubles, but if I bring him in this week, I won't have a player. So I'm kind of stuck there. But I suppose apart from that, my captaincy this week as well is a bit torn. I'm currently on Bowen. Could be Ronaldo, could be Man City, but who's going to play? No, I think I'm pretty set on Bowen. It's why I was saying if I had Kane, I would be tempted, but I'd probably go with Bowen and Cancelo as my vice. But yeah, that's probably me. So I suppose for the podcast listeners, Ronaldo, Calvert-Lewin up top, Bernardo, Jota, Bowen captain, Foden midfield, and then Cancelo, Trent, Lucas Digne when he comes in, and whichever other budget defender I go for in defence alongside David De Gea.
Oh, all right. That's good to me, I think. Anthony.
Right, the way I'm at right now is I have De Gea in goals, Trent, Cancelo and Laporte in defence alongside Konsa as well. All of them with good fixtures, and I'm quite content with all of them. Veltman's on the bench and sitting pretty. For my midfield at the moment, I have Bowen, Jota, Rafinha and Bruno Fernandes, and then up top, Ronaldo and Dennis. The bench then is João Pedro and Alan. João Pedro is a problem. Alan is a god and will remain there forever. And I have only one free transfer. And so kind of there isn't a clear issue, to be honest, in the team right now. If I was to point to anything, it would be that I would like to kind of chase some big points because I am forever trying to catch up, having had my diabolical start to the season. So at 350k, I wouldn't mind actually making that move of Ronaldo across to Kane. If I felt like I wasn't going to kind of get myself tied up in knots with the Man United double game week that kind of follows. Right now, I think I will do that purely because I'm just so fed up of having Ronaldo in my side. But actually, my captaincy right now rests on Cancelo, and I think it's going to stay there. Even if I brought in Kane, I think the captaincy will rest on Cancelo because objectively, I just feel like he brings the best points potential home to Brentford. So the clean sheet is, you would think it's pretty likely to come. Now I've jinxed it. And then there's also a pretty decent chance of an attacking return or 2, bonus points to match. There's always a haul in Cancelo in a way that, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think there's a haul in almost any of the rest of the players in my team, which is kind of bizarre to say. But I feel like Cancelo was far more likely to haul than a Jota or a Bowen or a Fernandes or a Ronaldo. I don't know how we've got to this point, but that's how I feel about it. And so I think Cancelo is very likely to be my captain this game week.
Yeah, no, fair play. He also signed a new contract, so I'm sure he'll celebrate by doing the whole kind of signing celebration, which probably isn't a thing. But
and also just sorry, and just given I talked about Salah earlier, if it does work out that Salah will be coming back, I'm optimistic he will be, to be honest. Then it would be, Ronaldo would move. I might even take -8 at that point and just start shoving things around quickly to get Ronaldo to sell Ronaldo, sell someone like Dennis as well, who can free up an awful lot of cash, and then upgrade probably Jota and just go from there.
Okay, exciting. No, that's good. That's good. Right. Well, as mentioned, I am on a wild card. I mean, there's not too much mystique about why I did it. As I said at the very start, I'm too far behind the main pack to be utilising the usual strategy of wildcarding into 31 after 30 blank, playing it later, whatever. I just can't do that now. I didn't think there was enough in my team to go with it. And my rank was worth doing. It's actually a pretty standard mix. I'll talk about it in a second. I think the way I'm looking at it is that I'm looking to get back up to the top 100k principally for the time being, and then push on from there in the next kind of few weeks. So I'm optimizing my squad for the near term. I'm going to try to progress from that point. As mentioned, I haven't got Salah yet. I plan to bring him in for Bruno and move out Jota as well in game 26. I'm assuming with my fingers crossed, that I can roll my transfer in 25 to do so. I know that's unusual, but it's a bit of an unusual season. I may yet change my mind, but I feel like Kane this week and Bruno for the double as captains will do a job for me of offsetting the Salah hit. But I completely understand why that's an opportunity for other people. Overall, my team is a mix of quality players and players with games in hand. I've got an eye on replacing some players with Chelsea players in game at 28, as I mentioned ages ago now, when it came to the likes of Reece James. So it's actually a 4-5-1, which maybe just reflects the conversation we had earlier on. In goal, I've got De Gea. It's just a boring hygiene pick, to be honest, but having him as my Man United defensive cover means I don't use up a valuable defender slot on someone like Dalot, because I don't want to be playing 5 at the back. A 4 is fine. I think having a 5th defender who is cheap enables the rest a lot more effectively than having a defender like Dalot, who I may want to play every now and again. I think that just kind of throws the whole thing slightly off balance. I've got Foster as a backup goalkeeper. Don't really care about that. Maybe it could be Raya. Who knows? At the back, I've got Robertson and Trent. The Liverpool double up. Cancelo. So I've decided to go with Liverpool double up rather than the City double up. Luka Dean, as we've spoken about. Veltman is the cheapie at 4.2, same as Anthony's got him too. Veltmania could come back. I very much doubt he'll come on the pitch for me. I don't think he's going to play that often, but he'll have more opportunities now.
Game week, it could have been truly mania, and he's there.
I think he'll be for first benchman during that, but there's more opportunities now for him because Burn has gone. I think in midfield 5 at the moment is Bruno, Jota, Foden, Bowen, and Buendia. Obviously Buendia. And up front, it's Harry Kane on his own. On the bench then, Veltman, Broja, and Cork native, Adam Ida, 4.9 million, the cheapest playing striker out there, who replaces Connor Cody as the mascot. So yeah, I'm quite happy with that, really, on the basis that there's a lot of quality and also it covers a lot of the bases. And I think that,
why is all your quality at third bench?
Well, actually, there's a good chance that Ida's the first bench this week, obviously, because he's playing Crystal Palace at home versus Veltman not having a game. And I'm more than happy to call an Adam Ida. So in game week 27, for example, when Robertson, Trent, and Jota don't have a game, Adam Ida comes to the rescue away at Southampton. So I'm very happy to have him. James Planet FPL has been waxing lyrical about Adam Ida for a little while, saying he brings a different dimension to Norwich's attack. And I don't. Frankly, it's a value call for me. It's 4.9.
He has brought a different dimension: goal scoring.
Well, assisting, pressing, all the usual sort of
radical gain for Norwich. Yeah.
I test shit, but it's very handy. I think he's just a decent pickup. And Steve, you mentioned Foden earlier on. For me, he just seems like a bit of a no-brain option just to throw in there. If he plays, he plays. If he doesn't, well, I'll have the likes of Broja, Ida, Veltman coming off the bench, so I think it'll be all right. I think that Norwich game in game week 25 is an absolute lottery, frankly, and I'm fully expecting to see Veltman play that double game week. So I think it all works out quite nicely together. And yeah, so 4-5-1 with Kane. I could, get the jitters and get Salah in, but I kind of like this team at the moment, and I feel settled on it. And I think that I'm going to try to have that in mind. Obviously, the things could change. There could be news that could kind of completely sway me. Maybe we'll get news of another double game week, which means I've got to cover it. But I think the majority of my players here, apart from Cancelo, Foden, and Bowen, all have games in hand or an impending double, and there's flexibility to remove Fernandez for Salah, flexibility to remove De Gea for Ramsdale. Yes, another goalkeeper transfer could well happen, and I'm fairly happy with that as it stands. It doesn't throw the baby out the bathwater, and it doesn't it just covers everything that I wanted to cover, and hopefully it will at least get me up to where I want to be.
The big fear really is that you're locking in either to require a hit to get Salah in for Burnley, to dump a double game weeker who you would be captaining in that double game week to get Salah in for Burnley.
Yeah,
or just waiting through the whole Burnley game.
Yeah, that's it though, because as Steve said earlier, why would I be I'd be thinking about captain Salah obviously if I had Burnley, but I think it's gonna be quite difficult to swerve Bruno for Southampton and Brighton at home. Obviously you can look at the underlying whatever, but that's what my captain's going to be, and I'm going to be betting that the EO for Salah is going to be low enough that it's not going to hurt me that much. Yeah, so that's the gamble really. The next 2 game weeks I can get away with not owning them if I go with this.
Two questions for you on this. What chips have you left?
One free hit, and then the rest bench boost, triple captain.
Yeah, and have you thought about bench boost yet, or are you kind of just going to let it slide until the end?
I'm not going to do it in 25 if that's what you're thinking, because I've got Ida with Man City at home. Even though Ida could score against anyone, I've got him against Man City at home. I've got Broya with Man United away, so that's just not worth it for bench boosting on that game week. And how I've got it set up doesn't work. But I think the bench boost eventually, like transfers and hits, are all going. It'll be all right for that. And there's so much is unknown at the moment. Hopefully, given the fact I've got loads of players in this setup who are either quality players, who if they've got a single, I'm happy to have them have a good replacement like for like. I could swap out Foden to Rafinha or something. I wouldn't be too upset about doing that if there was a nice double, or if I had to create an extra player to complement a bench boost. Like there's loads of different kind of areas of price points where I can move things around. So I'm just assuming that it will all work itself out, and it normally does, to be fair.
Fair.
There is a multi-week probably build to a bench boost if you want one that doesn't that isn't relying on the likes of Ida having a good week.
It won't be like surprise bench boost. It'll just be like you'll have some notion. And what was your second question, Steve?
The second question is, I suppose the one thing that stood out to me is I really like Broha, because I don't think you'll be playing him in the next 2 weeks, but then he's got those lovely fixtures and he's like really cheap, so I think he's a great pick. But what stands out is because you have Broha there, I think you're well set for the medium term. I suppose Veltman, I can't see you playing him in Gameweek 25 with the players you have, and I think the likes of a Lowton could be a good call there because he's 0.2 more. But if you had Lowton in now, I think that'll stand to you because you won't obviously be wildcarding when everyone else is closer to a double.
There's a simple answer. I'm at 0.0. So I can't afford a Lowton. Yes. Although, would I want to buy Lowton? I don't think he played the last game, did he?
I had him for his double game week. Was it a double game week last year? What happened? But he got like 17 points.
17 pointer.
That was heaven.
Yeah. The problem is with Lowton, which people haven't really, is that Connor Roberts actually played the last game, I think. So
Lowton.
Yeah, so he might he may no longer be as nailed as before. So it might all come down to Charlie Taylor. Burnley, I think, are crap. And do I want to buy one of their players at the moment? Probably not. I've got 4.2 million to play with. It's a straight shootout between Brandon Williams and Joel Veltman. Yeah, that's how crap it is.
Yeah, because if you had the 0.1, you could even get
Nuri. Yeah. But it is what it is, and I'm fairly happy with that setup as it stands.
I don't leave Remento as an investment in the future.
Could do, but I mean, Brighton would like to have a double. I mean, he'll be a nice first sub, won't he? I can't see Foden playing Norwich, to be honest. So I'm assuming that Veltman will come on for that double game week. Let's see. Let's see.
They'll have to play a double pivot and 5 defenders with Ida coming against them. So.
Exactly. I think my takeaway is, if the worst thing is what you're doing with Veltman, then I'm pretty happy with that wildcard, to be honest. And I'm never putting that up on Twitter ever, because all I'll get is absolute bollocks.
That's actually genuinely that's a question, because like really like United you kept what 4 clean sheets or something. It's something low like that. I have not prepped this. United haven't actually kept that many clean sheets. It's just like saves, but like the saves are a product of their inability to keep the attacks out.
They are. I think it's just the effect. It's just the EO really for De Gea.
It's easy not to think about the goalkeeper position, but you've made 5 goalkeeper transfers so far this season, so I suspect you're thinking about it.
I think it's actually quite an aggressive move to change the goalkeeper around. No, I think that I will probably end up swapping Ramsdale back in later on.
You could stick your pal Robbie Sanchez in or something.
Oh, no, never again. The guy is a terrible goalkeeper. Anyway, I think that we have outrun our time, Anthony.
Tom, thanks very much, everyone, for listening. We were Who Got the Assist. If you got to get correspondence in, whogottheassist@gmail.com. And thanks so much, Steve, for joining us today. You'll find Steve on Twitter at FPL Fairy. It's fantastic to have you on.
Yeah, it's been great to be on, guys, and I'll be looking forward to the rest of the season and tuning in.
Cool. Yeah, thanks very much for coming on, Steve. We're great to finally get you on. And also find Steve on Instagram. I should probably have mentioned, you probably should have mentioned, Steve, to be fair. The biggest FPL, I think one of the biggest FPL accounts on Instagram, aren't you?
Yeah, I think I done the strange thing of not really joining FPL Twitter, and I joined the FPL, say, Instagram world about 5 years ago when there was nobody over there. So I done the opposite, but yeah, I do kind of like most of my posting over on Instagram.
Yeah, it's FPL Fairy on Instagram. Cool. Thanks again for coming on. Anyway, hope this assisted you and hope we helped you get your mind back into fantasy football after a bit of a lull. Obviously, we've got 6 days, isn't it, until the next game week kicks off in earnest. We've still got a game on Saturday. Know when this was reported, but we'll speak to you ahead of game week 25 at that point. At some point, I think it's probably likely to be a solo pod next Thursday, given swift turnaround between game week 24 and 25. But at least you'll get to hear how my wildcard tanked, burned, and just genuinely kicked my ass, and how my original team would have scored triple figures. Speak soon. Take care.
Night all.